there was a New York Magazine story about you, and reading a lot of your writings, many times what you do is you criticize the political or journalistic points of view of either the writer or a politician who's talking about Trump and Russia fairly and often validly, but you don't deal with the underlying issue of the substance of the Trump and Russia case. For instance, just now, you made a valid criticism of the use of the word treason. But you didn't deal with the underlying issue of, do you believe that the Russians intervened in the 2016 election? In one of your most recent stories, you talk about this Dutch politician who's accused of lying about Putin, or who admitted he lied about Putin. But buried in that story, you say there's convincing evidence of Russian meddling, and you link to a story about the Internet Research Agency. But it's just like one passing phrase in a sentence.
That was the organization at the center of these indictments.
A few days later, they were indicted by Mueller. I want him to answer the question that I asked him, which was, do you believe that the Russians intervened in the 2016 election to help Trump? Because let me just say one thing was, over time, your position seems to have changed dramatically. Last year, it seemed that you thought all of this was a hoax. But more recently, you seem to, as I said, in kind of throwaway lines in your pieces, accept much of the idea that the Russians intervened. At the same time, you're attacking people for making too big of a deal of it. And so to me, I am confused as a reader of you, and I think a lot of people are confused about what your basic belief now is. Do you believe that the Russians intervened in the 2016 election? So I think what you've just said is something that is very important, which is that you've now said straight out that you think the Russians did intervene in some way in the 2016 election. And I think that many people who have read you, and I know that this is a big issue for you, because I've looked at your Twitter feed, and there's a lot of fights you have with people who interpret what you say, and you get angry at them on Twitter for accusing you of certain things. But you and I are in the communications business, and if the preponderance of what you write is interpreted by a large number of your readers in a certain way, and it's not what you intended, then you failed as a communicator.
Well, wait, hold on. So, but I think that's a little bit unfair, Jim.
No. Let me finish.
Look at the groupthink that goes on TV these days.
No. My only point is, I'm not talking about a groupthink. I'm talking about, have you accurately communicated what you really believe over the last year?
Totally. If you were to, let me just say.
Because you're now saying that's always been.
The idea that if people attribute to you things that you didn't say, it means that you failed as a communicator, I think is preposterous.
No, it's not.
It might mean that the reason people are attributing to me things I never said is because I'm a poor communicator. It might be because there's an attempt to smear people who don't get on board with the prevailing orthodoxy. In 2002, opponents of the Iraq War were constantly accused of being admirers of Saddam Hussein.
My only point is that
they weren't. There's lots of motives why people attribute things to other people that aren't what they said. And if you go back and look at what I write, and I recently compiled it, from the very first moment I began writing about this story, I always said the same thing, which is actually something that you said in your own article that I agree with, which is that, of course it's possible, even plausible, that there was some attempt by the Russians to destabilize the U.S. election, because that's something that the U.S. and the Russians have been doing to one another forever. So, I mean, why would I would never put it past Putin or the Russian intelligence services, oh, they're too ethical, or oh, they're too restrained to try and disseminate division and disinformation within the American polity. That's something that these two countries have done to everybody. So it's never been the case that I've denied it or said it was a hoax.
Okay,
I
but
just wanted
let me
to
just
see
say
evidence
this.
for it as a journalist.
You are a very talented writer, and you are a good communicator, and you are incredibly smart. And yet you must know that over the past year, the preponderance of what you have written has been interpreted by most people who I think are reasonable readers, that you are among the people who deny the existence of the Russian involvement in the election or collusion. That is the overwhelming interpretation of what you've written by most people.
But Tim, the pushback on that is, and I want to ask you this, where is your evidence of collusion? Not in a legal term. I just mean in
I'm
what
just talking
ordinary
about
people.
the way people perceive what Glenn has written.
Yes, but I think then Glenn can rightly say to them, well, you show me the evidence. For instance,